Gary, welcome to CBS Baltimore.com.
Good to be here.
Here comes the official. Former, were you the director, the curator, chief cook and bottle washer of the
I was all of the above. I
Everything.
was the guy.
Everything.
If there was a scrap of paper on the floor,
You picked it up.
I picked it up. And you always know who the boss is because that's that person.
There it is. A guy grew up in northern Minnesota, came to Baltimore, and put a world-class art museum together.
Thank you.
A tremendous career in the world of art. And now you've put it together in a memoir of sorts.
Yes, it is a memoir.
Sacred and Stolen, Confessions of a Museum Director. It's more than just how do you frame it. The framing gets into its own universe and its own almost fistfights.
It does.
I mean, talk
What
about
happened?
Well, okay, tell Lynn about when the Cone Collection was going to be reframed at the BMA. I know it wasn't in your museum, but you know about it.
Well, I
What was
remember the
the
first time.
drama?
First of all, the Cone Collection is one of the finest collections of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art in the United States, with a lot of Matisse. So it's a spectacular gift to the city of Baltimore from people who were from Baltimore and were right at the center of collecting when nobody was paying attention to the great artists that were then emerging. So a former director, a personal friend of mine, and his chief curator took all the frames off. They showed them in what you'd call a modernist kind of way, and I'll never forget the first time I saw them. They were like naked. Now, you know, I'm an art historian, and art historians appreciate the abstract beauty of something, but still, it was as if you were looking at Marilyn Monroe with. Now, maybe that's not exactly the right path to go down, but you see what I'm saying.
I want you to keep going there.
The point is, when the successor to that director came in and put the frames on, it's if the whole city would cheer. It's if, you know, the Orioles got into the playoffs.
Right. We're so happy.
Within the art community, at least, yeah.
But it's just such it's such an interesting profession. It's such an interesting culture. And there's espionage, there's intrigue. You were just telling us there was going to be an exhibit at the Walters of Georgian art.
Right.
And
I don't mean from Georgia next to where Atlanta is. I mean Georgia on the Black Sea. And this would have been the first exhibition from that nation in the United States. And we had the president of the country, Edward Shevardnadze, who was instrumental in dismantling the Soviet Union. It was his idea. We were partners in this. But the patriarch of the country, essentially the Pope of Georgia, was against it because he was absolutely convinced that we were going to steal the art, or better yet, we were going to make copies of the work of art, send the copies back, and keep the originals.
original.
Now, I don't know if he really believed that, but lots of people in Georgia did. At the end of the day, I had a curse put on me by somebody in the Caucasus. Yes, and my family too.
And one thing leads to another. It gets canceled. You guys are 150 grand in the hole.
Yes.
Was there insurance on that, by the way?
Well, there's insurance and there's insurance. The answer is no.
Okay.
No.
But it led to a late night meeting.
Yes, with Edward Shevardnadze and a couple of guys with those things in their ears, much like yours, but they had
Secret Service
bulges
guys.
under their coats because they had guns in there. So there were like 5 of us in this room, and there was the Silver Fox, is what they called Edward Shevardnadze. He'd gone through 2 assassination attempts, and you could see the scars. And he was very defeated, and he said, I, as the president of the country, owe you, and he didn't name the number, but it was 150,000. As a matter of state honor, as a matter of presidential honor, I want to pay this back. And then there was a pause, and he said, but I haven't paid my army in 6 months.
Oof.
And I felt so small. You know, I felt as if, why am I bothering this guy with my little problems? He's got big problems.
But it's the life you've led.
It's
I've been lucky.
amazing.
Yeah.
It is really amazing. Let's talk Stolen for a second. You were telling me before we actually went on the air about some thievery from the Walters.
Oh yes, we had brilliant guy. He worked for me first in the wood shop, and he could do anything. But he was the kind of guy that knew everything and couldn't leave you alone. He just wanted to tell you how many miles of railroad track existed in the Soviet Union in 1927. and he would corral you. So gradually but because he was so smart, he was promoted and promoted and promoted until he was head of night security. And you realize why, because he could only bother one other person then, because there was only one other person in the building. So, I mean, he never thought that through, but the fact of the matter was, there he was in night security. He told me the story 26 years after the theft. I tracked him down. He still lives in Baltimore. And he told me, you know, I walked through those galleries, and I love Asian art, and I just couldn't help myself. So he did this over 2 weeks. He stole 145 works of art.
145?
He didn't drive. He lived 4 miles from the museum. He'd put them in his backpack. So he'd leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. And of course, he'd go past security to leave the building. The people never looked in his backpack because he was the head of night security.
And he's walking out of there,
Walking 4 miles home with some 12th century jades in his backpack. He then went on to steal 5 ancient rings, gold rings. And he melted these down. And I said, Greg, his name is Greg, why did you do that? He said, I wanted enough money so I could leave the country with all this loot of his. Now, how he was going to get the loot on a plane, he never left Baltimore. He'd never been out of Baltimore. He didn't have a passport. So he also stole 2 dueling pistols. You know, everything was Asian except the gold stuff. And the dueling pistol, I says, why do you steal these, Greg? He says, if I couldn't get out of the country, I was going to shoot myself. I said, Greg, this makes no sense. Those are 150-year-old pistols. We have no bullets.
There, and there you have it.
I thought it was kind of strange. You might wonder how we could go for 2.5 weeks without noticing something was missing, because he was so meticulous. He would go into the cases, take a few things out, rearrange everything, put the labels back where they belong. You look at the case, beautiful. But
now this is going to go back into an analog era before we had cameras everywhere. So he was able to do that, obviously.
Oh, yeah. No, we had no cameras. We didn't even take pictures of the cases. The best thing that happened to museum life was cameras, our cameras.
So how'd you catch him? Like, how did you figure it out?
Well, the FBI came in because the assumption was at first that this had gone over state lines. It was so, the theft was so focused. Our assumption was a Japanese collector had commissioned somebody, sort of like the Pink Panther, to come across the alley on a little wire and sneak through the window and get this stuff and go off to Tokyo or something. So the FBI came in, and when they came in, they know how to do stuff. And they had their eye on this guy, you know, didn't take brain science to figure out he was the one who had access in peace and quiet and knew how everything was put together because he'd actually worked on those cases in the wood shop. He knew how they were built.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I understand the FBI is going to be able to profile a criminal mind. Do they have specific experts in art theft?
Oh, yes.
Do they?
In fact, I met him eventually. He's now in the Philadelphia office.
That's really
and
cool.
I ran into him in a hotel, actually in Pittsburgh. I would say it would have been 20 years after the theft, and I started talking to him, and he said, oh, you're the guy. What do you mean? Oh, you're the guy that went to Rehoboth, right in the middle of the investigation. And by the way, most everybody that was being, you know, talked to and given lie detector tests worked for me in the museum. And so, but they never asked me for a lie detector test.
No.
And I had reservations in Rehoboth, so I took off.
There is
You're the one that went to the beach.
Went to the beach.
You know, there's a Zach Brown song in there somewhere. I mean, there really is. You told us on the air, and there's a really dynamite coffee with about Renoir theft from the VMA. It's in a city that's so historically rich in art. There's a whole book of it right here.
Fascinating.
In your own backyard.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in Baltimore or anywhere near here, you'll recognize a lot of people. I don't name them all, but there'll be people that they can figure out who they are. And yet, the drama extends all the way from Ethiopia to California. So it's a world. The cereal bowl is the world size, but it has a lot of pieces from right around here.
It's just such a. When I first saw you on social media, this was out. I immediately sent you a note. I said, this is coffee with right here. I mean, because there'll be people buying this in museum shops.
Everywhere.
I hope so.
Everywhere.
I have to pay back all my investment.
Now I'm going to give, before we end here, I'm going to give you a tease, because Gary was telling me about his second book. you want me to spill the beans, or would you like to
Oh,
spill
go to beans.
He is going to, he has proven, you do it, because I'll let you get the mail.
The next book is called The Shroud, Mystery Solved, Case Closed. Working with the scientists, we figured out exactly how the Shroud of Turin was made, and you could make it at home with products you could buy within 1 mile of where we're sitting right
Easy.
now. Yeah, it's a little messy, but you can do it. And we know it was made, I know it was made in 1356 in northeast France. I could almost point to the spot. And the force behind it was a wealthy, aristocratic French woman. So there you have it.
Case closed.
But when you start, but all you had to say was the Shroud. And I look at Lynn, and she's like,
Whoa.
"Oh, we're gonna get mail. We're gonna get letters."
Good. Well,
When is that coming out?
as soon as I can, I have a little editing yet to do, and then I'm looking for a publisher.
When you get that out, you're coming on.
Okay, good.
You're coming on.
I'll come in an armored car. How's that?
You're going to come with a couple of Chevron Nazis guys
Yeah,
who are going to
there we
protect
go.
you. Sacred and Stolen Confessions of a Museum Director. I can't vouch for this enough.
Wow.
You're just really a Baltimore treasure yourself.
Well, thank
and thanks
you very
for
much.
everything you've done to improve the culture of the city.
That's very generous of you.
You're
Thank
really
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for stopping by. CBSBaltimore.com.